Obama is bringing in? He said yes. Number 3, I said, what is Obama's real reason for flooding America with Muslims right now when so many states say no? And I said, you took a lot of heat for attacking Carson. Don't you think all the Republican candidates should agree to attack Hillary, not each other, during future debates? It was a very interesting, I think it was our best interview. And perhaps Cumulus will post it on some of their outlets, some of their websites. I hope so. It's a very, very important interview for a number of reasons. We learned a lot about Donald Trump's good nature. We learned that he's definitely not a petty politician like Hillary and like Obama, who has extreme inability to take any criticism. In fact, there's an article about her that just came out that she's hunting down anyone who criticized her in the media. Oh, I don't mean with guns and stuff like that. No, she's using the old tactics of the Stasi. Hillary is using the Stasi tactics of intimidation. Well, you'd expect it from a liberal. Clinton goes after comedians for making fun of her. This is on the top of drudge. Personal contact information demanded. Clinton goes after comedians for making fun of her. Are you listening to the corruption of this woman? Clinton goes after Laugh Factory comedians for making fun of her. In what appears to be a first for a serious presidential contender, Hillary Clinton's campaign is going after 5 comedians who made fun of the former Secretary of Hate in stand-up skits at a popular Hollywood comedy club. That's at the Laugh Factory. And she's demanding personal information. They want their personal contact information. That's what she's doing, going after comedians now. But she's fit for office, as you well know, in a banana republic. Maybe Uruguay in the 1950s would be fit for her to run. Maybe where Evita Perón was, and it wasn't Uruguay. In Tennessee, politician says activate the National Guard to send the refugees out of the state, send them back to ICE. Good point. 855-407-282. Let's take a quick call. Steve on WMAL. What's the topic? Go ahead, please. Steve, go ahead, please.
Yeah. You're a good audience for bullying them. And on your point...
Wait, Steve, please, can you just make your point?
Yeah, I was. On your point about Einstein, you can't really predict how 12, 13-year-olds are going to grow up. They may be great contributors to the society. Guys...
Well, I understand that, but Einstein came in as a grown man who was a world-famous physicist, not as a 13-year-old who had the potential to be anything.
Exactly. So why would you stop those guys? The guys that I used to play tennis with, they were all Middle Easterns. And they came over during Nasser.
All right, so since you're such a compassionate, logical man, let me ask you a question. What percentage of the Muslim refugees that Obama is ushering in might be potential terrorists? Are you saying 0%?
No.
Okay, so what percent is it? 1%, 2%, 3%?
I figure it's less than 1%.
All right, less than 1%. So amongst the 100,000 he wants to bring in, what's 1%?
All right, the way you would deal with that...
No, answer the question. Amongst the 100,000 Muslims that Obama's shoving down our throats, what does 1% of 100,000 equal?
10,000 is what he said, so let's be correct. And
wait, let's be correct. How many is he bringing in?
What I would do in this case, Mark, is I would let the women, the children, the elderly...
You're not answering the question. Stop it. Have a dialogue with me. How many Muslim refugees does Obama intend to bring to America?
10,000.
10,000? Are you sure? Because he said 10,000 initially, then he said 100,000 the very next day. But let's say it's 10,000. What's 1% of 10,000?
100.
100. So let's say it's even 100 terrorists. You're saying that's something for us not to worry about? How many terrorists did it just take to do what they did in Paris? Was it less than 100 or more than 100?
Less than 100. I didn't say you don't
Thank you. I rest my case. Have a nice day. I'll be right back.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now. 855-400-SAVAGE. 855-400-7282. Savage.
Your Savage Nation is sponsored by SwissAmerica.com. It's the only company I trust for tangible assets, gold and silver. Call 800-BUICO. So Obama is using the racist card. Everything that he says is being parroted by all of the henchmen and henchladies who work for him, right down the line. Anyone opposed to his plan to dump Muslims down our throats from Syria, unvetted, Muslim men, mainly 85 to 90% of them are single men of military age. Anyone who opposes it is called a racist. And yet every poll shows that despite the blackmail by this evil president, despite the blackmail, the majority of Americans do not want them here. Now, if we're a nation of the people, by the people, and for the people, if we're a nation that's supposed to have representative government, when you have a rogue president like this, who is acting against the will of the people on a daily basis, what do you expect me to do on this show? Sit here and say, aye, aye, sir? You're the king? He's not a king. He's an elected president who's supposed to be representative of the people, not of Catholic charities, not of Lutheran family services, not of Baptist family services, not of CARE. God only knows who he really represents. He's supposed to represent you and I. Every poll says we don't want them here. Not because we're bigots, but because we want to live. We don't want to be bloodied by the next terrorist event. And yet they keep going. Anyone who opposes you are racist. Their standard operating procedure. We've heard it our whole life. Mike on WSBA in Pennsylvania. You're next up on the Savage platform. What's on your mind?
Probably,
Mike, go ahead, please. What's with the callers today?
But everybody's stealing your stuff. I mean, Donald's talking about the president being insane, and you were the one that talked about this months ago. Then I'm watching Newt Gingrich and Rudy Giuliani talking about bringing Syrians here. We would have the enemy within. Nice stealing your title from my previous book that I have. So, I mean, I guess you've got pretty thick skin that you let these folks take credit for what you've done and not even...
Well, very soon you'll start hearing them twisted into zero government. They can't say government zero because it would spread my message. So they'll say, we really have zero governmental representation. That'll come out of Giuliani's yapper next. But all right, he's a good man. He's on the right side of things. I don't care that they're using my ideas. As Lao Tzu wrote many years ago, many centuries ago, Lao Tzu, what did he say? He said, it does not matter who uses your ideas as long as your ideas are being used. I mean, that's how I feel. As an original thinker, I mean, I'm used to that. I've had book titles when I was younger and did books on immunity. I had a whole book stolen, by the way, by a French publisher. An entire book, the entire manuscript was stolen by a French publisher, and we couldn't do anything about it. So it is not the first time ideas have been used by me. I'm an original thinker, and people need original thinkers in order to think originally. But I'm sending you government zero for the holidays. Do not cook it with your turkey, because at a certain temperature it will catch fire. I think it's Fahrenheit 451. I'm not quite sure at what temperature paper catches fire, which is why you're not supposed to use paper inside turkeys, incidentally. All right, my friends, these are serious times. They are very difficult times to sleep in. And the worst of this talk was this article, this fallacious argument that most Americans opposed admitting Jewish refugees before World War II, and the very same number of bigoted Americans are now opposing the innocent, creative, wonderful Syrian refugees. One of the most horrendous, disgusting twists of reality that I've ever seen. But it didn't stop Dana Milbank, whoever that may be. I don't know what a Dana Milbank is. It sounds like a recipe. Dana Milbank may be a recipe for Thanksgiving, but in the Washington Post, he argues that we're xenophobic to keep refugees out. And they're comparing it to the SS St. Louis, the ship of Jewish refugees turned away from Florida. This is the ugliest comparison I've seen yet by the Obamaite liberal complex. There's no equivalency, because we know that amongst those Muslims there will be terrorists. The man who just called said that it's probably 1%. Even he, as a decent man, said, well, I admit that maybe 1% of them will be terrorists. Well, that's a big number. Let's say 10,000, that's 100 people be terrorists. And how many did it take to do their damage in Paris? It was certainly less than 100, wasn't it? So you're not worried about that? How many Westerners are going to die because of Obama's insanity? How many? How many more Westerners will die to let them into this country? If it's only 100 out of 10,000, can you imagine what it'll be if he lets in 100,000? That escalates it, doesn't it? What's 1% of 100,000? That's 1,000 terrorists. That's enough, Mr. Milbank? Let me address it to Dana Milbank. If it's only 100 terrorists amongst the 1,000, amongst the 10,000 that are let in, where do you want them to live? In your backyard? Why doesn't Dana Milbank invite some of them to go work at the Washington Post? Why don't the politicians invite them in their homes? But my best idea of the day was this. All of these good liberals who want the refugees, why don't they put up some collateral in the form of a house, a mortgage, into a fund for potential victims of refugee terrorism down the line? And if there is no terrorism, they get their money back with interest. If there is, the fund is used to compensate victims for terror. What is wrong with that idea? Well, then you put reality where it is. You know, there's a Buddhist saying. A Buddhist said, don't fight with reality because you're always going to lose. You ever hear that one? Whether it's in love or business or war, don't fight with reality because you're always going to lose. Have you ever heard that one? You never heard that. Robert, you never heard that. Buddhist master said, I'll say it over and over again till you hear me, don't fight with reality because you're always going to lose. Reality will always win. You heard it first in the Savage Nation, right? The wit and wisdom of Michael Savage. Don't fight with reality because you'll always lose. What does that mean? It means that logic would dictate the reality of the situation is right now, while it is true that most Muslims are not terrorists, it's unfortunately true that almost all terrorists are Muslim on the planet today. I said almost all. So given that that's the logic today, and by the way, that logical statement was made not by Michael Savage, but it was made right after 9/11 by a Muslim scholar. I'm just repeating it, I'm parroting what he said. So given that that is the case, why would the reality of the situation dictate that you bring in Muslims right now, especially from a war zone, and knowing that they're not vetting them, that they can't vet them, they don't know who they are, that 8 of them had the same name, by the way, recently on an analysis. And how do you explain that the DHS and the FBI knew this mastermind, so-called, had him on their watch list, and did nothing about it? Tell me why the FBI didn't drag him in and throw him into a holding tank. Tell me why. You have the answers to any of these questions? Because I do. I have answers to all these questions right here on the Savage Nation, home of Government Zero.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage.
Here are the headlines on michaelsavage.com. Paris terrorist caught in raid, plan to attack airport and mall next. And you'll see one of the brave terrorists with his behind showing. I'm sure that he will sue the French for violating his religion by marching him out with his pants off. Well, that's a violation of his culture and religion right there. You can't show a terrorist behind. Apparently that's a violation of their religion. I guess they can't go to heaven if at any time they're shown naked to the world. Here, a police dog killed by woman suicide bomber. America's enemies within, how nearly 70 have been arrested in America over ISIS plots. Thank our intelligence agencies for that. And so Obama says that we shouldn't be worried about women and orphans. The 7-year-old Belgian Shepherd dog Malinois was killed by terrorists when French special forces raided an apartment building in the Saint-Denis early on Wednesday morning. A Twitter user who paid tribute to the dog Diesel said he had died to defend our colors, while one police handler said it was a little like losing one of our colleagues. Well, that's only part of the story. But let me tell you something. There's a lot more to the story than that. And the reason we're saluting the Russians today is Putin is sending 150,000 soldiers to Syria to wipe out the subhumans in the Islamic State. 150,000 Russian soldiers. And suddenly you will see all of the brave men who rape 8-year-old girls, the brave men who pose on social welfare sites with the weaponry that is given to them by these vermin. You'll see them flee like the rats that they are as the Russians go in. And let me tell you something that you don't know. The Russians are not going to be followed by Jake Tapwater. I can guarantee you that the Russians will not let Jake Tapwater or any of the other boys from America's Brazil of the jungle, called the media, follow them into action. Because unlike America, they're not going to be constrained by rules of engagement, which almost guarantee that our men get killed or shot first. I can guarantee you the Russians will not be followed by Jake Tapwater. They will not be followed by cameras. They will not have helmet cams. They will go in and clean them out. They will kill them, every last one of them. At the same time that Russia is stepping up to take out the worst threat to civilization since the Nazis,